botanist with Department of Land and Natural Resources and the Division of Forestry and Wildlife. I want to start off by asking you all just take a look outside behind me, and what do you all see there, right? Most people would see just a curtain of green, right? So we often don't see individual plants in the environment around us. And this sort of plant blindness leads us to not really understand or value the role of individual species in our ecosystem and what they do for us. So we miss out on knowing that Hawaii has one of the most unique, valuable, and interesting native floras in the entire world. As one of the most isolated land masses on the globe, the plants that got here have evolved to our native conditions and have changed, and they're not found anywhere else in the world. So there's about 10,000 plants if you walk around in the state, and less than 10%, about 1,380 of them, are native. So most of the plants all the plants I saw here walking from my car this morning, they're not native, they're not from here. And this is one of the challenges we have to managing our natural resources, is overcoming this plant blindness and raising public awareness. Another fact that maybe some of you know about Hawaii is that sometimes we're known as the endangered species capital of the world. Because we are so isolated and the plants here are so unique, they're not found anywhere else in the world, they're also threatened by all the recent invasive species and the impacts those have had on our flora. So we have more endangered species in Hawaii than any other state. We have more endangered plants on the list than any other state. Nearly half of the endangered plants in our country are Hawaiian plants. And this is sort of an outsized burden for a state with less than 1% of the land area of the country. So our division is challenged by managing all of these resources throughout the state. Just to go over what a few of these are, give you a little bit more background. There are over 250 plant species in Hawaii with less than 50 individuals left. Many with just one left, right? But this is one of them here. It grows in the Ko'olau Mountains and nowhere else in the world. So there are some here in Manoa and some in Wailupe and some of the adjacent valleys, and then that's it. There are also, thanks for the assistance there. There are also about 22 plants that don't exist in the wild anymore. They're extinct in the wild. So they only exist in cultivation at various facilities across the state. And so these people work to maintain these plants and keep them in cultivation and replicate them and get them back out to a place where they can resume their role within the native ecosystem. Slide. We also have a lot of examples of plants that are relatively common, but still really imperiled. So many of us have heard of rapid ohia death. It's a term for a couple of new forest diseases that have come into the state, and they're quickly decimating thousands of acres on the Big Island, and now it's been found on Kauai, and it's kind of poses this really looming threat of coming across and really undermining the function of our forests across the state. One of the challenges the division has is to try to manage all of these resources across what is basically the widest state in the country, with a whole bunch of different islands, and most of the plants are unique to each individual island. So communication across this expanse is really a challenge and a hurdle for us. So this is known, and so now this endangerment is known, and there are a whole bunch of different agencies, private individuals, nonprofit organizations that all do this type of conservation work. So keeping them all going and understanding who's working on what often falls to the permits that they're required to get from our division for working with endangered species. So this is an example of a whole bunch of the different agencies that we work with and we issue permits to on an annual basis. So what we want to do is be able to standardize and share our data. So we have some ideas about databases that are in use and some capacity for people to use ArcGIS and other products out there to document what they're doing and report it in on that. So we work with the federal government and large botanic gardens, but we also work with dozens of private landowners who really don't have access to that type of software and those kind of advanced systems to record what they're doing and then pass it along to us in a standardized way. So I'm really glad to see the connection with the Aloha Plus dashboard, because that's where we want to feed our results, right? We want to show the public progress on where we're going, how we're meeting these goals, but more importantly, where are the gaps that we're leaving behind? And unless we collect standardized data in a regular way, we're going to miss out on all of that stuff. So with hundreds of species across all of these different islands, our problem is standardizing and reporting the data in a streamline. We're starting to address this slowly but surely. The state has entered into a contract to develop an application, online application for endangered species permitting. So this is done through the INFORPS system, and people will go online, they get an account, they register. It's not a Hawaii.gov system account, it's a separate account. And then they just tell us some basic information. This is where I want to work. These are the plants I want to work with. This is what I want to do with it. And then we route, a PDF version of this application around. It goes out to all of our staff for review. And then we decide to accept it or, have some conditions added to it. And then we okay the permit and it goes out. We don't have any way to turn it around and receive the information that we're requiring back to us. So we want to know things like, how many populations of plants did you work with? How many plants were there total? These are things that need to go straight into the dashboard so that we understand how we're doing and we have these measurable metrics. Are there seedlings there? Are there young plants? What is the population structure? It would give us some idea of how to project into the future how these plants might be doing. If they got no keiki, then there's red flags going off, right? These aren't going to be here for very much longer. And one of the main things we do is we fence them, we protect them from invasive species like rats and weeds and slugs and ants and all those other things. We know, for the most part, what our division does, but we have no way to collect all this information from dozens of private individuals that are doing this as hobbyists or as kind of paid grant nonprofits that are working on a small scale across the state. So we're missing out on all of this information. We have a lot of systems in place to describe where this work is going. We've split up the entire state into these polygons, so this is available for download. And that's an example here of where two plants of a gardenia might be located on the island of Molokai. So if somebody's working on these plants, we want to know where they are, what species they're working with, how many plants they did, what they did to them, where they planted them, and how they're protecting them. Then we can incorporate that into our standard reporting that goes out to Aloha Plus and out to our federal partners and all these other cooperators across the state. We maintain an access-based database at the moment, and we're moving towards a new version of it that's going to be online and cloud-based and written in SQL language so that we can have multi-tenant, we can get into this from across the state, and we want to be able to prepare ourselves by streamlining the reporting data that's going to be able to be integrated into this database, and we can report kind of in real time what we're seeing out there. Just for an example, we don't know how many mature plants there are of all of these really, really rare native species. For several of them, the data we have is from large agencies, federal agencies, state agencies, large botanic gardens. But we don't know, sorry, just go ahead. For example, these. There's a couple extinct in the wild. How do we get that information out to people who might be surveying? How do we fill in the gaps here? And the answer is, hopefully, in this room. We've messed around with a few different options for taking data in the field. This is an example I'm interested in. It's open source software that is supported and maintained by the Harvard Institute for Humanities Institute, I believe, at Harvard. It's supported by a whole bunch of different UN and human rights groups that go take data out in the field about what might be happening on site, who needs access to fresh water, who needs access to secure food, those types of things. We've taken that open source software and we've used it for taking data in the field. So when we're collecting ohia seeds, we can use this type of format and this system, but it's got a cap. We're capped at 10,000 forms, period, across the state. So once we reach that, we're going to lose this tool, which allows our managers to kind of custom build these field forms and incorporate photos, a GPS unit right onto a mobile device that can then just be automatically linked and uploaded when they get back to the office. This is the type of system that we would like to see here. Open source, free, available for different users of different experience levels to be able to create the forms they need, and really just to do it in a standardized way that when we see the results, we'll be able to easily incorporate them into our data. I have some examples of the data that's been coming in. What you're seeing above is a standard Excel spreadsheet that they use to report work being done with invertebrates. So I'm a botanist, so I want to keep talking about plants, but the scale of this is beyond what we do every day. We report on all of our native insect populations, Kamehameha butterflies, and we report on access into our natural area reserve systems. We report on endangered species work in progress, period. So it's a little bit larger than just what my area. So thanks very much. I look forward to learning about all the opportunities, and thanks for your help.